everybody. We are here today to look at your FAIS Skills Pipeline and how do we address the sustainable skill shortages in our country, but also within our organizations. I think one of the biggest challenges that we are experiencing in businesses as a whole is the fact that we don't necessarily have a succession pipeline that is meeting the demands of our organizations and our growth potential that we've identified in our companies. So for us, we need to look at this from a national point of view. So how does our country get affected? But very much so, we also have to look at how our organizations, our businesses get affected and how we can properly address this. So if you go to slide 2, you'll see that the act that actually governs our environment, and I'm sure you know this, is the Financial Advisory and Intermediate Services Act. And we have quite a few sustainable challenges where this is concerned. Our skills pipeline and our individuals who need to get the minimum credits don't necessarily have all the abilities and skill to actually deal with the challenges that comes with writing exams. And they might have studied years ago and now all of a sudden have to find themselves within a classroom environment again, writing tests and exams, which makes it quite daunting and overpowering for them as individuals. So part of our strategy as organizations to ensure that we are meeting the skills demand is actually to ensure that we actually also address people's emotional state with regard to writing exams and how they feel about actually dealing with the fact that they have matriculated 5, 10, 15 years ago and now all of a sudden have to prove that they have the ability to actually do their job that they have been doing for a number of years. Is it a good thing? Of course it is. We needed the Act to formalize and put regulation around our business and what we're about and our financial platform within South Africa. And that is a wonderful foundation that we have laid. However, we need to assist our employees to feel more comfortable when it comes to exams. That's one of your biggest challenges you're going to face, is to ensure that people actually are ready for the exams, they're briefed for it, they understand what is expected, they've been given support, and specifically support from you as the business. This is over and above your training provider getting involved and doing what they need to do. This is you as the employer actually creating an environment that is supportive and is guiding them through this process. As we move to slide number 3, you'll see some of the challenges that we just look at is that some of the qualifications and the credits are quite haphazard. So we've gone in the past and we've upskilled people and we've developed them, but it hasn't made a bigger sense. So we've taken an individual, we've done planning for this person, but it's here and there and everywhere. It doesn't make a bigger talent sense, and that is quite challenging. We need to make sure that that every single program we do is leading our employees to an outcome, be it a whole qualification like wealth management, but it has to make sense from that point of view. Also a lack of consistency, meaning what you find from provision from one perspective versus the next perspective is not always the same. Our consistency with regard to what we are doing internally within our businesses as well is a challenge. And then also we've looked at some of our easy way out options, and that is like, what is the cheapest way to be compliant, which is not necessarily the best way to look at this. And we looked at potentially looking at placing people on recognition of prior learning programs, and actually they might not be ready for that, meaning that it might not be the best suited program for them to deal with actually the requirements of the minimum credits from a financial advice point of view. So these are some of the challenges that we have. One of the biggest things just from a provision point of view, and just this is a personal comment and opinion, and that is that the more the qualification or the skills program that you're doing with the individual makes bigger sense, the more they will get out of it. The more it is just a year and a now and a quick fix, the less reward you will get. Yes, you invest more now, meaning it's more time and it's more money, but at the end of the day, you're going to reap rewards 12 months, 18 months, 24 months later. So it's just something to take in consideration. As we move over to slide number 3, you'll see there's a quote from Andili Singh, and I just would like to read it. It says, "The majority of the resignations come from employees who are simply fed up with having to take exams at this stage in their lives where they are unable to meet the compliance requirements in passing the exams." And this is your skills planning, research and development division of your INSETA. And for me, this just speaks again to the fact that we have to have the exams. We've got to be compliant with regard to what our acts require from us. But again, it proves the point which we discussed a little bit earlier when we had the opening of the presentation, and that is about the fact that it's not about the fact that people don't know what to do. It's about the fact that they are not prepared for these exams. Their study skills is not being briefed properly. There's not a support mechanism and process put into place properly, and it is not actually form part of our strategic succession planning. Again, I'm reiterating what I said a little bit earlier. Unless we look at this from a bigger strategy point of view of how we need to address the skills gaps in our country, but also in our company, we are going to continuously have some of these challenges. And then if we move over to the next slide, you'll see why is this actually critical. So why is it critical that we have this within our companies? And I think that we know it, we need to be compliant, but from a provision point of view, we've got to make sure that when we choose a provider and when we engage with somebody that is going to support us in this process, we must make sure that the person is offering accredited programs. We've got to do our due diligence with regard to making sure that the accreditation status of that provider is current, that they have got a good track record, that they have shown proof with regard to how many people they've actually exited through this process. What is the type of learner support that they're actually giving to these individuals? Your provider needs to become an extension of who you are within your business. They've got to understand your strategy. They've got to understand what intent is, where do you see it, what are some of your succession planning challenges that you have. They need to interpret that and come up with a good plan to meet your skills shortage in relation to the qualification that you've identified they need. Then one of the other things is this qualification and these skills program are externally moderated, which means that it doesn't sit within the scope or within the control mechanisms of your actual provider, which means it has to go outside, be moderated, and from that perspective there's also sometimes a time delay. Is it a good thing from a quality point of view? I think so, because here we go and we have another body or another person getting involved to make sure that the process is sound and that the philosophies and the learning that took place is good. On the other hand, if it's not well managed and well planned and well coordinated, you're sitting with time delays, and the people that will feel the time delays is you as the employer, because you will not be able to make use of those individuals on your floor with regard to insurance and with regard to the products that you would like to sell or engage with your client, which makes it problematic for you, because that is critical. Your planning and timing with regard to how moderation happens, they need to link and work effectively. Then obviously you have your financial services boards, compliance programs. I think that is very critical. We need to make sure that whatever provider we make use of, that they actually are offering a FSB compliant program. I think we sometimes omit to actually check that that is also in place. It's not just about being accredited. It's about making sure that your provider is also represented by all the bodies that they need to be represented by. Then quality provision. The proof's in the pudding. Speak to other clients. Speak to people that they've worked with before. Do your due diligence. I'm sure you will not appoint an employee without actually making sure that you've done proper reference checks, that you've made sure that you're going to get the potential that you actually saw in the person in the interview. Do the same with your providers. Make sure that they are going to deliver what they say they will deliver. And then lastly, and I bolded this in the presentation, and this for me is a huge component and so critical, and that is, please make sure that you plan effectively for your skills requirements. I know it might sound a little bit like a stuck record because I've mentioned it before. However, it is so important to make sure that we know what we want in 6 months' time, that it is not a reactive process. The moment it becomes reactive, we are choosing providers that's not meeting the criteria that we've spoken about, because we all of a sudden are between a rock and a hard place, and sometimes that will lead to a compromise to say, okay, well, it's not the best person because the best person is not available at the moment, so let me take who's available now. And I think that we need to make sure that we have options. And the only way that we make sure as employers that we have options is if we actually do our planning effectively. As we move over to the next slide, you'll see one of the things that is very important is when we actually look at the content and the material and what your providers should ensure with regard to the process of your recruiting, your training, and your coaching. Is actually Bloom's taxonomy, and it's linked to your FAIS compliance. This is very important, that you should have knowledge comprehension, application, and analysis. And I think just from a last check point of view, it is so important to ensure that the content of what is being shared with your individuals and your employees is also meeting your demand, which means your provider has to be accredited. Agreed. They've got to be compliant with the requirements of the wealth management qualification. They've got to ensure that they're accredited with the INCITA, so there's certain compliance requirements with regard to the content. But in the same breath, it is very important to make sure that the content is actually meeting your requirements as an employer as well. That's why customization of learning material becomes so important. Seeing how you can blend and link it to things like your own products and some of the challenges that you experience in your environment, making sure that there is not just knowledge base, that you are actually moving into people understanding, comprehension, that you can see that they can apply it. So here we can see applied competence, especially in learning, and then analysis. Can they actually deal with multiple type of challenges that we get from our customers and actually come up with a possible and workable solution? And that is, if you think about it, financial advice. Financial advice where we move to where somebody is giving advice to an individual about retirement planning, about where they see themselves in the future, wealth creation. All of that is about looking at the person holistically, but with multiple challenges that the person actually is experiencing and coming up with a workable plan. Your staff need to be able to work towards that. We're not training all our people to become financial advisors all at once, and we're doing it in bite-sized chunks, but that's what we should be aiming for. One of the questions that was asked when we did this in the forum was, so where do I find people that actually has got the skill set, that actually is compliant with regard to FAIS, and that I can see that they've got the requirement credits and that I do not necessarily have to go through the immense amount of training and skills strategies that I might have to need in my business if I can't find suitable candidates. Now, there is a database, obviously, and it is controlled by the INCITA and the Financial Services Board. However, that is a private and confidential database. So one of the things is, when I spoke to the INCITA and asked the question, was to make very sure that we are not actually poaching from each other. And I think that's quite important. We tend to recycle our employees and think that moving a person from one organization to the next organization is okay. It isn't. It just perpetuates the actual skill shortage that we have. Is there places where you have niche skill, where you need to go out and you need to find somebody with experience and skill and the ability to actually deal with that complexity? Yes, of course, and that's advertised for when we need to deal with that. But there's a lot of space to actually make sure that we do proper succession planning by actually taking graduates or taking previously unemployed individuals and putting them through a process. For you, there are some initiatives and there are some things that you can look at as an organization to say, okay, so how do I work effectively with this? What is some of the strategies and some of the initiatives out there that I potentially can make use of. And if you go over to the next slide, slide 7, you'll actually see that what is some of the financial incentives that's available to you as a company. Well, we have got the Monyetla Work Readiness Program. That's one of them. I think that it is fantastic that we have a program that is allowing a multi-seater access. And what I mean by that is that you have got, as an employer, the option now to choose at a level 4, NQF level 4 qualification between the bank seater and the in-seater and the services seater and facet, different types of qualifications that will best work for your environment. This is great because this means that you can make use of a financial incentive to deal with your succession planning. But again, if you're not ready as a business knowing what you need, Monyetla won't help you. All it becomes is then it becomes labor intensive for you, and you won't necessarily be able to retain those individuals that you are putting on that program. So part of the process is, if you plan properly, then these type of financial incentives become critical and they become actually worthy because you can work with them. Then also we just need to bear in mind that we need to work towards actually full qualifications and not just skills programs. And I think that that's one of the big things that we need to start planning for, especially from 2014 onwards. And I think that the reality here is that we no longer can just do skills programs. And again, it comes back to what we said earlier. It has to make a bigger sense. This short program that you are doing for the now skill needs to lead to something because you are creating a more robust employee. So that actually needs to move over to the wealth management qualification. So you need to not only look at succession planning with regard to your individual, but also with regard to how do I manage my talent? So what do I do? What programs do I give them? How do I link what I'm currently doing from a short-term process to meeting my needs and my demands from a long-term point of view? From my side, I just want to say thank you very much for allowing me the opportunity to share my thoughts with you. I look forward, if there's any comments, to any comments that you will make, and thank you very much.